We're going to start by going to the end of the book of Judges, because the last 5 chapters of the book of Judges appear to be an appendix. And we'll go to chapter 17 of Judges and verse 1. And there's an emphasis on the 2 incidents at the end of the book of Judges on 2 places. Verse 1 of chapter 17, and there was a man of Mount Ephraim whose name was Micah. So there's an emphasis on Ephraim. We go to verse 7. We read, there was a young man out of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. So there's an emphasis on Bethlehem, Judah. Verse 8, they departed out of the city from Bethlehem, Judah. He came to Mount Ephraim. And then in verse 9, Bethlehem, Judah. Chapter 18 and verse 2, the children of Dan sent to their family 5 men from their coasts, and they said, go search the land, to the end of the verse, who, when they came to Mount Ephraim. So the emphasis on these 2 places in this incident in chapters 17 and 18. Then we come to verse 13 of that 18th chapter. They passed thence unto Mount Ephraim. Verse 29 then, it says, when these people come, they establish a city in verse 29, and they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father. So they'd gone from their inheritance, which was out to the west of Jerusalem, to this place right in the north of Israel, so that from there onwards it was from Dan to Beersheba were the 2 extremities of the land. So they called the name of the city Dan. And verse 30 says, the children of Dan set up a graven image, and Jonathan the son of Gershom the son of Manasseh. Now the word Manasseh in Hebrew is only very slightly different from the word Moses. Manasseh, Moshe is the Hebrew words, and it's probably Moses that's referred to. So Gershom was a son of Moses, so you've got this man Jonathan related. It's an indication that we're very early in the time of the Judges. You get a further confirmation when you come on to the next incident in chapter 19, verse 1, another emphasis. It came to pass in those days, when there was no king in Israel, there was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. These 2 places again. Verse 2, his concubine played the whore against him, went to her father's house at Bethlehem, Judah. Verse 18, we are passing from Bethlehem, Judah, toward the side of Mount Ephraim. From thence am I, and I went to Bethlehem, Judah. And chapter 20 and verse 1, and all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man from Dan to Beersheba. So the whole congregation is there to go and fight against the tribe of Benjamin, from Dan to Beersheba. So Dan has already been established by the time this chapter occurs. And if we go to verse 28 of Judges chapter 20, we read that Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days. So Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, and you'll remember that Phinehas was involved in the incident of Baal Peor before they entered the land. So this must have been early in the time of Judges. So what it seems that this last section of the book of Judges is, it's an appendix giving some idea of what the situation was in the time of the Judges, and two places are picked out to show how things had gone wrong in those two particular places. They were probably no different from other places in Israel, but there's a concentration on these two places. So the first incident ends up with idolatry in Dan, and the second deals with the immorality in Benjamin. And the characteristic of these chapters, we go to chapter 17 and verse 6, we read, "In those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes." Chapter 18 and verse 1 we've already seen. "It came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel." Chapter 19 verse 1. "It came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel." And chapter 21 and verse 25. "In those days there was no king in Israel, every man did that which was right in his own eyes." So these two places are associated with the downfall, the immorality, the decline of the people of Israel. The book of Ruth deals with the rehabilitation, the spiritual rehabilitation of one of those places, Bethlehem, Judah. Ruth chapter 1 and verse 1. "It came to pass in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab." And we know how the book of Ruth works out. In verse 2, also Bethlehem, Judah is mentioned, and that the book has to do with Bethlehem, Judah. And it ends with verses 21 and 22 of chapter 4. "Salmon begat Boaz, Boaz begat Obed, Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David." And so the book of Ruth, in this town, Bethlehem, that was associated with the decline of Israel, is the centre of the development of the line of David, established by a faithful man of Israel who was of Bethlehem, Judah, married to a Gentile who comes into the hope of Israel. And so we see the spiritual rehabilitation of Bethlehem, Judah in the book of Ruth. And now we come to the first book of Samuel, and we see the rehabilitation of Mount Ephraim. Verse 1. "Now there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zoph, an Ephrathite." Ephrath is associated with Bethlehem. Bethlehem Ephrata is the name that's given in the prophecy of Micah. So he's an Ephrathite, and we find in the book of Joshua that the cities given to the family of Kohath, to which Elkanah belonged, were given in the tribes of Judah, Simeon and Benjamin. So being from Ephrath fits in with the family of Elkanah. So we're here in Mount Ephraim, and here we start to see the turning of Israel back again to the service of God. And verse 2 says, Elkanah had two wives. The name of the one was Hannah, the name of the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. As had two of the founding mothers of Israel before her. In Genesis chapter 16 and verse 1 we read that Sarah had no children. In Genesis 30 and verse 1 we read that Rachel had no children. They eventually had children, but so that was their problem. It was a problem in Israel when they had no children, and Hannah particularly felt this problem. So verse 3 says, this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto Yahweh of hosts in Shiloh, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. So he went up to sacrifice, and that word for sacrifice is used particularly of the Passover in Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 2. That word for sacrifice in the Hebrew is associated with Passover, so it's probably for the feast of Passover that they came to. Now they went to sacrifice unto Yahweh Tzevaoth, in the Hebrew, the Lord of hosts. It's a name that is used constantly through the Old Testament. But right up to this time, this is the first time that it is used in the Scriptures. You've gone all the way through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges and Ruth. You get to Samuel before that militant title of Yahweh is used. He who shall be armies is the meaning of that name. And I believe it's significant that the first time it's used is in a verse that contains the names of the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas. So God is going to deal with the decline in Israel by dealing particularly with Hophni and Phinehas. So we've got this militant title used of God. So it's used in connection with Hophni and Phinehas. Verse 5 says that Elkanah gave Hannah a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord Yahweh had shut up her womb. So he gave her a worthy portion, that the margin says a double portion. She was particularly favoured by Elkanah. But Hannah still had her problem. Yes, her husband loved her, but she hadn't got any children. And verse 6 says, and her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because Yahweh has shut up her womb. Now that word for adversary isn't Satan. It's a word that's used of Jacob when he comes out of Padan Aram and he's about to meet Esau, and it talks about my distress at that time. He'd gone away to Padan Aram because Esau was after his life. Now he's about to see. So that was a time of distress for him. And this is the word. It's also the word that's used in the prophecy of Jeremiah when it talks about the time of Jacob's trouble in Jeremiah chapter 30. So her trouble, her adversary, also provoked her sore to make her fret. And that word fret it's not just an inward thing, I don't think. It's used, if we go to chapter 2 and verse 10, it's used, verse 10, it says, the adversaries of Yahweh shall be broken to pieces, but out of heaven shall he thunder upon them. And that thunder is the same as fret in chapter 1 and verse 6. So it was something that was boiling up in Hannah, and so it happened. Verse 7. As he did so, year by year, when she went up to the house of Yahweh, so she provoked her, therefore she wept and did not eat. And Elkanah says, well, yes, all right, you haven't got any children, but you've got me. The end of verse 8, am not I better to thee than 10 sons? And the answer, of course, was no, sadly. Yes, he was a loving husband and she loved him and he loved her, but it wasn't enough. So we come to verse 9. So Hannah rose up after they'd eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post in the temple of Yahweh. We read in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 11 concerning the priests under the law that have their work to do. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 11. It's Hebrews chapter 10 verse 11. That's right, verse 11, sorry. And every priest standeth daily, ministering and offering oftentimes the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. So there were no seats in the tabernacle, in the temple. The priests stood for their work. But, verse 12, this man, Jesus, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, continually, sat down on the right hand of God. So Jesus, when he had done his work, yes, he sat down. But the priest shouldn't be sitting down. And so Eli is sitting down. We always see him sitting down, it seems. Chapter 4 and verse 13. When you get the news of the battle against the Philistines, we read that, well, when he came, lo, Eli sat upon a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out, sitting down again. He was a big man. He probably found it difficult to move, but that's the characteristic of this man. He's by a doorpost in the temple. And then verse 11, Hannah vows a vow. And she vowed a vow and said, O Yahweh of hosts. Now that would be unusual. They came to sacrifice to Yahweh of hosts. It's only the second time that the name is used in the scriptures. But she is asking for God to deal with her problem. If thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto Yahweh all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. I will give him to Yahweh. Exodus chapter 22 and verse 29. Interesting in connection with this commandment. Exodus chapter 22 and verse 29. Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruits and of thy liquors. The firstborn of thy sons shalt thou give unto me. So Hannah was vowing to give this child, this her firstborn, to God. and there shall no razor come upon his head. And we know that that was true of Samson. Again, Samson's mother had no children. We don't know what her name was, but the angel told her that the child was to be a Nazarite from his mother's womb. Let's just go back to that. Judges chapter 13 and verse 5. Lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head. For the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. Now, we've got the name, the militant title of God at the beginning of Samuel, as well as dealing with the corruption within Israel. Samuel was going to continue the work against the Philistines. Samson started that work, and he judged Israel 20 years. But if we go to 1 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 13, we read there, So the Philistines were subdued, and they came no more into the coast of Israel. And the hand of Yahweh was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. So as well as dealing with corruption in Israel, God was dealing with the enemies of Israel, the Philistines. So we've got the start of a work of God in Samuel in a militant work in subduing this corruption in Israel and the enemies of Israel. Right, well, verse 16, Hannah says, we know what Eli says, he accuses her of being drunk, but verse 16, Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Chapter 2 and verse 12, now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not Yahweh. So we've got the Yahweh of hosts is directed against the real sons of Belial. So Eli answers, he realises a mistake in verse 17 of chapter 1. Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition which thou hast asked of him. Now, the Hebrew word translated petition is also translated, it deals with not only the request, but the gift and the gratitude for the request. It's very much like some of the several other words in Hebrew. So the word petition in verse 17 and asked are parts of the same verb in the Hebrew. Verse 27, my petition which I asked of him. Verse 28, I have lent, same part of the same verb. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord. So this petition seems to multiply in its effects. All aspects of it are being brought together in a similar word in the Hebrew. And then verse 18 of chapter 1, Hannah says, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. And we've got a great similarity with Mary, of course, when she was told that she was to have a child, and it's explained to her how the child would be born, because she knew no man. And she said, "Behold, the handmaid of the Lord." So here is Hannah recognising herself as a handmaid, just as Mary in the New Testament. And it says, at the end of verse 18, "So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad." She dealt with the problem, she left it in the hands of God, and she was going to, she'd done what she could, and so we have to, we see how things develop. Well, verse 19, "They rose up in the morning early, worshipped before Yahweh." So they got up early, went with their offering, and returned and came to their house in Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and Yahweh remembered her. So God remembered her. And so verse 20, "Wherefore it came to pass, when the time came about after Hannah had conceived, that she bare a son, and called his name Samuel," or Shemuel, saying, "Because I have asked him of Yahweh." And that's the, again, part of that same verb that we've been looking at. I've asked him. So we've got this petition that goes, again, all the way through the two books of Samuel, if you take the title of the book. So that petition has long-lasting effects. Verse 24, "When she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bullocks, 1 ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine, and brought him into the house of Yahweh to Shiloh. And the child was young." He was a young lad, but he was brought and left at the temple, or it's called a temple. In fact, the temple hadn't been built. Clearly what had happened was the tabernacle was permanently in Shiloh, and buildings had been built around it, and that was called a temple. Verse 28, "Therefore also I have lent him to Yahweh. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to Yahweh." And he worshipped Yahweh there. So this young lad was brought up in the worship of Yahweh. And we have the reaction of Hannah at the beginning of chapter 2. I'm going to read the first 10 verses. You'll get the flavour of it. We can't go into any detail, but Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoiceth in Yahweh, mine horn is exalted in Yahweh, my mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. There is none holy as Yahweh, for there is none like thee, neither is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so exceeding proudly, let not arrogancy come out of your mouth, for Yahweh is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and they that stumbled are girded with strength. They that were full have hired themselves out for bread, and they that were hungry ceased, so that the barren hath borne 7, and she that hath many children is waxed feeble. Yahweh killeth and maketh alive. He bringeth down to the grave and bringeth up. Yahweh maketh poor and maketh rich. He bringeth low and lifteth up. He raiseth up the poor out of the dust, and lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes, and to make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are Yahweh's, and he hath set the world upon them. He will keep the feet of his saints, and the wicked shall be silent in darkness, for by strength shall no man prevail. The adversaries of Yahweh shall be broken to pieces. Out of heaven shall he thunder upon them. Yahweh shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength unto his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. And there are clear parallels with was known in my young days as the Magnificat. It's something that most church people learnt off by heart. If we go to Luke chapter 1 and verse 46, it says, "My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit hath rejoiced in God my Saviour. He hath regarded the low estate of his handmaid. For behold, from henceforth all generations shall call me blessed. For he that is mighty," verse 49 of Luke 1, "hath done to me great things, and holy is his name. His mercy is on them that fear him from generation to generation. He showeth strength with his arm. He hath scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He hath brought down the mighty from their seats, and exalted them of low degree." Very similar language to Hannah. "He hath filled the hungry with good things, and the rich hath he sent empty away. He hath holpen his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, as he spake to our fathers, to Abraham and to his seed forever." And so we have these two women who have their child, or are about to have a child, and rejoice before God. Incidentally, back in 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 10, he shall give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. It's the first occurrence of the Messiah in the Hebrew scriptures. There are anointeds in Leviticus, but it's talking about priests there. Here it's talking about the anointed king, the Messiah or the Christ. I shall exalt the horn of his anointed. So we've got this praise to God arising out of this blessing that is extended to her. And of course we should show gratitude in the same way when we have been blessed by God. In our times of trouble, let us put our cares upon him and no more be sad, as Hannah was. But when we receive the blessing, let us see that we show our gratitude to our God, because that's what he expects. So, verse 12 of 1 Samuel 2 then, the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not Yahweh. Judges chapter 2 and verse 10, Judges chapter 2 and verse 10 talks about the generation that grew up after the time of Joshua. Judges 2 and verse 10 says, "Also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers, and there arose another generation after them, which knew not Yahweh, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel." The last verse of the book of Judges, "In those days was no king in Israel, every man did that which was right in his own eyes." That was the effect. And God was going to deal with that effect and with these two men that knew not him. He was going to deal with them. Well, these were terrible priests. Verse 14, the stuck of the flesh hook into the cauldron or the pot, all that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came hither. And it had the effect, verse 17, "Wherefore the sin of the young man was very great before Yahweh, for men abhorred the offering of Yahweh." You just imagine it. the action of these priests caused the fact that they hated going to offer to their God. No wonder God dealt with them. Well, verse 20, we read that Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife and said, Yahweh give the seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to Yahweh. And they went into their own home. And again the word lent and loan are related to this asked and petition and so on. It's this which is returned. So that it's the same that's used, same word that's used when the children of Israel borrowed from the Egyptians and they lent to them. It wasn't with the sense of it being paid back. It was because of the petition they gave them, such as they spoiled the Egyptians when they came out of Egypt. And so verse 21, and Yahweh visited Hannah so that she conceived and bare 3 sons and 2 daughters, and the child Samuel grew before Yahweh. So 3 sons and 2 daughters, that's 5, plus 1, that's 6. She didn't bear 7, but that seems to be a superlative that she uses of the barren bearing 7. Incidentally, we know that Mary had at least 7 children, and you think when you think of Mary, you know, her times of contemplation would be few, I should think, with 7 children. She had 4 besides Jesus. She had at least 4 sons and 2 daughters. So that, you know, 7 children, bringing up 7 children. Amongst all that, she kept her integrity, brought them up in the right way. It's in the hurly-burly of life, let us still hold on to the way of truth, and so did Hannah. And so, verse 22, now Eli was very old and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. What abomination in Israel. He was very old. Exodus chapter 32 and verse 26 tells us of the incident when the children of Israel worshipped the golden calf. And we see the characteristic of the sons of Levi here. Exodus chapter 32 and verse 26. Then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, Who is on the Lord Yahweh's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. He said, Go unto them. Thus saith Yahweh God of Israel, put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp. Slay every man his brother, every man his companion, every man his neighbour. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. And then in Numbers chapter 25, we have the incident of Baal Peor. And we read of Phinehas, one that we've already come across. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. And those that died in the plague were 24,000. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Phinehas the son of Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest hath turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, while he was zealous for my sake among them, that I consume not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Wherefore say, behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace, and he shall have it, and his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his God, and made an atonement for the children of Israel. So that the priests of God were supposed to be zealous. Eli was anything but. Yes, he remonstrated with his sons, but they took no notice. And so, 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 25. If one man sin against another, he says to his sons, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearkened not to the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. That was what was going to happen. But then verse 26, what a contrast. And the child Samuel grew on and was in favour both with the Lord and also with men. Just as Jesus, many years later, he foreshadows the Lord Jesus in his growing up. Then verse 29, you've got a man of God coming to Eli, and he says, wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honourest thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people. The honourest, you kick at my sacrifice and mine offering. And Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 32 talks about the people of Israel as Jeshurun. Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked, it says, as a prophecy of the way the children of Israel would be. And he honoured his sons above me. Malachi chapter 1, an interesting sidelight on that. Malachi chapter 1 and verse 6 says, a son honoureth his father, and a servant his master. If I then be a father, where is mine honour? And if I be a master, where is my fear? Saith the Lord of hosts unto you. So that word, that title, which is very frequently used when you come towards the end of the nation of Israel in the land. The Lord of hosts, saith the Lord of hosts unto you, O priests that despise my name. And you say, wherein have we despised? So where is mine honour? If I be a father, where is mine honour? In chapter 4 of 1 Samuel and verse 21, the word for honour is the word kavod. Where is mine honour? In 1 Samuel chapter 4 and verse 21, when the wife of Phinehas is about to die, verse 21, she named the child Ichabod. Where is the glory? Where is the honour? Saying the glory is departed from Israel, because the ark of God was taken, and because her father-in-law and her husband. And so the honour that should have been given to God was not given to him. Eli honoured his sons above God, and so God dealt with them. And so the house of Eli was going to be put down. We've got the man of God tells him that he's going to be put out from the priesthood, or there's going to be a faithful priest. Verse 35, I will raise me up a faithful priest that shall do according to that which is in mine heart and in my mind, and I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. That Christ, the Messiah, he shall walk before mine anointed forever. And in the 1st of Kings and chapter 2 we read of that transition. 1st of Kings chapter 2 and verse 27. So Solomon thrust out Abiathar. He was the last of the line of Eli. He thrust out Abiathar from being priest unto the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord which he spake concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. And then in verse 35, and the king put Benaiah the son of Jehoiada in his room over the host, and Zadok the priest did the king put in the room of Abiathar. So Zadok was the faithful priest who was to stand before his anointed, before David, or before Solomon in this particular case. But of course there's going to be, he, the faithful priest, will be before mine anointed forever. And so there is an order of priests in the age to come. The sons of Zadok, they are going to be immortal, we believe. They're spoken of in the prophecy of Ezekiel. And so we've got this, there are so many threads going through these first two chapters. We've seen how God worked to bring about his purpose. Even though Israel had gone down, he found one here and one there, faithful, and starts to turn things around. He is the one who will be armies. He will accomplish his purpose. And this little child that was asked and was given and was given back to God was the one through whom that work was to continue, and through to the time of David and so on. So the work of restoration starts with these first two chapters of Samuel, and the enemies of Israel being subdued, and God in his wisdom starts with this small start. By the time you get to the end of the Old Testament and the time of the occupation of the land, that Yahweh of hosts is being used time and time and time again. 24 times in the prophecy of Malachi, in 4 chapters. First time in the 1st of Samuel chapter 1. So God will accomplish his purpose. He's going to subdue his enemies, and he's going to preserve his people. Oh, brothers and sisters, what a glorious heritage we have. Let us take comfort from this faithful woman, Hannah, who asked a son, and God gave it and brought about and started the working of his purpose at the time. So we continue through the book of Samuel to see how Samuel continues as time goes on.